I'm Dr. Al Freeman, Associate Director of LCMS School Ministry. And once again, we're thankful to have Grant Maynor here with us. The LCMS Accounting Department and a great background in finance and helping churches understand finances, and now helping us as schools to lead Finance Friday and help us understand budgeting and so many other items with our finances. So, Grant.
Thank you, Dr. Freeman. So today the plan is to talk through a couple of concepts and ideas that relate to preparing your budget, and then we're going to go through a budget spreadsheet template that we have available for everybody. I believe Will might have already dropped it in the chat. It's got a lot of formulas set up in it already, and hopefully will make your lives easier through the budgeting process if you choose to use it. And then if anybody has questions about their current budget that hopefully we can answer, we're going to open the floor up to questions at the end as usual. So we're going to start off with a couple of items. So the first one is historical budgets. And so when you're preparing your budget, going through this budget process, one of the most important tools that you have at your disposal is your historical budgets. That has numbers that you've actually used in the past, your actual revenues, your actual expenses, and it gives you a platform to build upon to say, hey, this is what we spent, this is what we brought in the last 5 years. How does that compare to what we project that we're going to bring in next year? And you can use it to help them build your budget for the current fiscal year. Then another tool is department request forms. And so this is a form used by teachers or department heads, depending on how big your school is, and they can submit. I actually have this to share, so I'll bring it up while I'm talking about it. That would probably help.
Yeah, this is a tool that we have that obviously you can alter to make it fit your needs. So we just want to show you a sample, provide this to you. Obviously, you can change the names on there and whatever information that you need to change. But it is a sample. Take it and make it your own.
Yeah, absolutely. And so as you can see, you can put your name, the name of your school here, and then the department head or teacher can go ahead and sign this. And so it gives them a sense of ownership over their budget when they're submitting the things they need. And so depending on how your school's chart of accounts is structured, whether you have accounts and classes or departments and accounts, their teachers and department heads can then put in, say, 1315 as the account number if that's athletics, and then say you need 10 computers. You can go ahead and fill this out, and then you can provide a justification for why you need it, say updating the system to record statistics and provide training to our coaches for our sports teams. And then you can say how much each unit costs, whether it's $250 a computer. These days, probably a little bit more for computers, but then they input their total cost, and then they can submit as many lines as they want to whoever's doing the budget, and that provides that sense of ownership of, hey, this is what I requested, and this is what I received, and so I can't really complain, or I can be glad with what I received because I was a part of the process.
Yeah, and that's a biggie, is just including them in the process, and also allows them to monitor how those items that are being purchased are being utilized. I always like it too for historical information, because the department then tracks that and they can see purchase dates, depreciation of the item, so they know replacement. And again, as an administrator, I'm getting all this information to really see what the needs are with our school. And for me too, all budgeting goes back to the mission and ministry of the school. So how does that tie in to our mission and our ministry, the goals that we have for our school? So we tie it all back to that.
Yeah.
That's being a good steward of everything we have.
And we will continue to hammer this point home. The more information you have at your disposal, the easier your budgeting process is going to be.
And more accurate.
And more accurate too.
Not just today, but in the future.
Yep,
because
when you
you're
go back
always
and look.
looking at historical information.
Absolutely. And so after we move on from department request forms, two important items to note while you're budgeting is your income. And so that can be defined in two different ways, called hard money and soft money, which is a fun way to say it. And so your hard money is the tuition you bring in each year. as kind of a stable, as long as your tuition is not changing from year to year, it's generally a stable income source. And your soft money is any fundraising and donations, which these days will be impacted by inflation.
Yeah, so really, hard income, obviously, we know what the tuition amount is, we know financial aid and so on, so we know that's going to be come in. You always have to leave some allowances though, right? Because we know sometimes families may not pay. There are also out there programs, companies that have tuition insurance. I know that some of our schools utilize that, and families can take out tuition insurance. Should they move or should something happen, that insurance plan can kick in and cover a certain amount of that tuition. So if you're interested, we can talk about that more at another Finance Friday or put some information out. But really, that's kind of your hard income. You have that pretty well analyzed. Soft, it's just like variable income.
Yep.
You're not really sure. Variable expenses. It depends on how much electricity you're using.
It'll change year to year. Yeah.
Yeah. So your donors, historical data, you have that to know how much should be coming in because of that historical analysis. But right now, a lot of things are impacting that. Stock market, inflation, discretionary income for families is down. So you really have to pay attention to both sides of the income or revenue.
Yeah. And as you were saying with families, as inflation happens and cost of living goes up, your tuition might not change, but it might become a bigger chunk of their income for families, and so that might bring down any other additional money they might be willing to give or able to give.
Yeah, and sometimes we all know a lot of our families will be paying tuition, but they'll also provide donations above and beyond that. And now that soft money coming in might be decreased, and that they know that they have to pay the tuition.
Yeah. So one of the last items we wanted to hit on before we talk about the budget spreadsheet that we have for you guys is enrollment trends. And so this is another item that will help you both historically and in the future. If you know your enrollment trends for all your grades for at least 5 years, it'll help you project income this year and in the future.
Yeah, there are a couple points that really we hammer on and threads throughout all of these. One is to absolutely know the cost to educate a student. And enrollment trends is another one of those that we kind of pound on quite a bit because you really have to know, and you should have it charted out. You should know historically how many first graders continue on into our second grade, how many second graders continue on into our third grade. How many 8th graders continue on into our 9th grade. You want to track all of that in a spreadsheet, and if you can do it historically over the last 5 years is always kind of nice. You should see, normally we keep 96% of our first graders into second grade. So you can kind of count on those enrollment trends, and it also helps you evaluate things like, did the economy disrupt this year what our historical numbers are? So it just gives you a lot of great information for the budgeting process, but also strategic planning process too.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is the budget spreadsheet we've been alluding to for about 3 months now, but here in the flesh. And so on the very first page here, it does have a box for you to track your enrollment, not as necessarily as extensive as grade by grade, but there is a pre-K and a K through 8 columns here and rows here, and so you can track for 5 years what your enrollment was for those grades.
Yeah, and I think we have one that we could probably put out too that's more of a tracker. I mean, really, a tracker is just a simple Excel sheet every year to look at how many go down and just progress through the boxes. This one's very nice, though. All the formulas are built in, once again, so it's plug and play. And you can change any of the wording or phrasing in this document to meet your needs. So pre-K can be changed, K to 8 can be changed. If you're a high school, you can put in 9 to 12, or if you or adding a high school, if you're pre-K through 12, you can underneath of K to 8 put 9 to 12. So utilize it to benefit you. You can change these things without disrupting the formulas, as long as you're not changing something in the formula box.
Correct. Don't change the formulas, or else you'll break all of Al's hard work.
Grant and I joined together to create some of these spreadsheets, and he's a formula whiz in that accounting background.
Yeah, I do my best. There's definitely better people out there, but it's fun to work on formulas sometime. And so we'll walk through this spreadsheet a little bit here. And so as you scroll down, you've got enrollment trends, but then you can budget your tuition receivable and your deferred tuition revenue, whether that's your budget item and your current, as a way to track. Then there's stated tuition versus collected tuition. Do you want to talk a little bit on that, Dr. Freeman?
Yeah, I mean, we all know that what our tuition number is not necessarily what the tuition that we collect.
Yep.
So our tuition number might be, let's just round number 10,000, but with financial aid or something else, you might have an average tuition collected per student that's maybe 7,000. So that's something very important to know for your budget, because a lot of times you're thinking, oh, tuition's 10,000. Well, no, really, it's 7,000 that we're receiving. So we already know that we have a gap between the 7 and the stated 10, and then the cost to educate a student might be 12,000. So the gap on your actual tuition of 7,000 isn't 7 to 10 and 3,000 that you have to make up, but rather 5,000, because cost to educate is $12,000. So you have to figure out, okay, with that gap, how are we going to fundraise? How are we going to make up for that gap for all the students that we have?
Yeah.
So again, it's very important to know cost to educate a student, historical numbers of students, empty seat costs we talk a lot about too. But you have to know that gap and figure out how are you going to close that gap so that you at least have a balanced budget. And hopefully a surplus budget.
Yeah. And as you can see here, it's nicely laid out. You can input your stated tuition and your enrollment to get your gross tuition. But then, as Dr. Freeman was talking about, there's discounts for early payment, multiple child, and you can change this spreadsheet to put in any discounts that your school might have that aren't listed here.
Or add to,
Or
right?
add
I mean,
to,
you can add to these. And if you need help with that, we're here to help out and kind of lead you through that process too.
Absolutely. And so at the end, you should end up with your net tuition number. And so that is a nice tool to show what your net tuition is going to be after all of these other factors.
And you know me, I'm a former high school history teacher, so I love history.
Yep.
And I love history of budgets too. So that net tuition, I'd love to see every year how that changes for planning purposes.
Absolutely. And so we can go in depth more here, but I want to hop over to the tuition calculation spreadsheet. And so this is a little bit more.
Wow,
in-depth.
Grant, that's a lot.
It is a lot
at us here.
This is where the formulas really get to come into play. And so here in this tuition calculator, you can enter your K through 8 enrollment, what your potential scenarios are, and so you can update numbers here. And so say you put 250 here. And so the reason there's multiple columns is that you can put in a range of what your tuition, your enrollment might be. And so maybe it's 250, maybe it's 215, and so on and so forth. And then you input your stated tuition per child, your overarching for those grades. And then you get 5 different scenarios of what your gross tuition might be based on these potential enrollment numbers. And so that's a nice little calculation there, quick off the bat for you.
Yeah, so best practice is typically to run 3 budget scenarios. You know, one on the low end of enrollment, what you think enrollment is going to be, and that's kind of the middle one, and then one that's, hey, if we hit all the targets and we really recruit well and retain our students, this would be the high-end budget. So it gives you a sense. This one, we've given you a few more columns to even do that.
Yeah.
I will say here, since we're talking about student numbers, one of the pitfalls of schools is to say, hey, we have a deficit. It's looking like when we calculate all this, and our budget has a $20,000 deficit. Well, let's just add 2 students to the enrollment numbers, and that'll cover it. Well, it won't. It won't cover it unless you actually get those 2 students and you hit that other number, right? So you really need to be legitimate in the budgeting process so that you are financially sustainable and growing.
Yeah. Bloated numbers in accounting are never a good thing with budgeting.
They are not your friend in the end. It might get the budgeting process done, but in the long run, it will come back and be a serious problem.
Absolutely. And so after you have your gross tuition here, you can scroll down and there's, again, these detractors from your tuition, whether they're discounts or other things, and you can input the actual number of that discount and how many students you believe will receive that discount, which will then spit out a number here with the nice fancy formulas. And at the bottom here, you can then see your net tuition.
Yeah, and if you don't have those discounts, just simply erase them.
You can zero them out.
Yeah.
Like, pretty easy. And there you go. And
Yeah,
so
and in the first column too, in column A, if you don't have that discount, just backspace and it will eliminate
Just like
that
that.
item, and then you don't have to worry about it. Or if you call your discount something else, put in whatever you call it.
if there's not a formula in the cell, feel free to customize this as much as you want. And if you do happen to break a formula, like Dr. Freeman said, we are happy to help out and either send you a fresh, clean template, or we can dive into your budget and see what's wrong and try and fix it.
Yeah, and when you download this template, remember, download it, save it on your computer, and then if you do somehow it gets messed up, we still have the original copy in our folder that you can access.
Absolutely. And so there's a couple of miscellaneous fees down here below, but for the most part, this net tuition row is what you're going to be looking at, and so you'll see what you are going to potentially receive for that many students enrolled, minus any discounts they might see. And so I'm a big fan of this tuition calculator. Any calculator I'm a fan of, I'm an accountant. But this is a really useful tool to use so you can see a wide range of scenarios while you're building your budget.
Yeah, don't let it overwhelm you, because you can see a lot there, and it can be, oh wow, this is way too much.
Yeah.
Go in, just kind of look at it, mess around with it a little bit, put some numbers in, see what it calculates, so on. Look at the categories and see if they're named right for you. And again, if you run into some issues, let us know, and we can always run another session or send out some FAQs or something.
Yeah, and we're always happy to help with questions via email. A tip that I always told my clients at my previous job, whether they were pastors or church administrators or preschool directors, I said, if you're feeling overwhelmed by this budget, go ahead and just zoom in on a couple of rows at a time, and you will be able to just focus on the small window of a couple of numbers. Don't worry about how it all ties together there at the bottom. Just worry about a couple of rows and what you're working on, and then just move row by row as you work down and kind of put blinders on. Now we don't get overwhelmed by the big picture.
Yeah, that's what we tell students, right?
Exactly. So we can dive more into this in a little bit, but for now I wanted to see if there was anybody came with questions regarding their own budget or questions about what we talked through so far. And if there aren't any questions, we'll keep working through this. We have a couple other things we could talk about if needed, but I would love to open the floor up to see if anybody had any specific questions about budgeting in their budgets or what we've talked about.
You can either type it in the chat or raise your hand and we'll get to it. I see that Will has put the link to today's documents in there, so you have access to all of those. I don't see any hands raised or questions. Do you, Will?
All right. And so another thing that we are hoping to accomplish with this template, and Dr. Freeman's hoping to accomplish, is the more schools that use this and take advantage of this, the easier it will be for school ministry or me to help out when there are issues or questions about the budget. If it's a widespread, across the board form, then it makes it easy to answer questions, right, and to fix things.
Yeah, and even if you utilize some other program or whatever, if you could dump it in here, it helps us help you. And again, we can help if you utilize Sage or Peachtree or Blackbaud, QuickBooks. Yeah, so we have dabbled in some of those others as well. This is, as you can see, a simple Excel spreadsheet.
It's not too crazy in terms of the formulas. I've seen more crazy than this. And so if there still aren't any questions, we can move on to the fundraising and programs page of this template. And so this is a nice little calculator that's going to show you any revenue. So this is the soft money that we were talking about, any fundraising. You can change the names up here for any fundraising you might do, or any programs you have. That's that auxiliary income. And then you input any fees you have, and then any actual revenue, and then it calculates it there at the bottom. So you can project or even prepare for what numbers you think you might have based on your historical budget numbers of fundraising and program. And as we talked about, it might be a little different from year to year based on inflation in the stock market. But overall, as a tool, it's a nice handy subtotal tool here for any kind of fundraising or auxiliary programs that you might have. Then, after you have your revenue portion for that, if you have any expenses for those fundraising and programs, you can then input it, and you come out with your net income for that program or fundraising event. And it puts in a nice little summary box here for you at the bottom. And you can again change these. The rows here at the bottom of the summary box will correspond to whatever is typed up here in these columns up at the top. See, it changes there.
Yeah, so everything is linked for you. So again, it's plug and play. You can mess around with it. We've given you several columns. You can always add to those, but we try to give you enough in terms of what you might be doing in terms of fundraising programs on the income side. And then obviously you can change the expenses if there's some other expense that you have that doesn't match up to the ones that we've given you.
So as a former school principal, what would you say is the importance of having good numbers projected or in your budget for your fundraising and auxiliary programs in regards to the overall budget picture?
Yeah, well, it obviously it tells me what I have to spend in terms of revenue. So for me, it always matched right back up to our goals for the school for that year, to our mission and ministry. I'm one that was never a big fan on candy bars, balloons, and extensive fundraisers because I felt for the cost-benefit analysis, which I'm always a big fan of, I thought we were doing an awful lot to bring in very little. Okay. So I like to target more of the bigger fundraisers, and sometimes you do the smaller ones. You might do wrapping paper at Christmas time. It might bring you in what you think is a significant amount of money, but for all the work and the effort involved, you kind of average it out. But it could be also, well, we're doing that because it's historical, it's a community builder, it's fun. Yeah. Well then, that adds to the benefit of it. So you kind of have to take that into account as well. But what it also does for me is it tells me historically what's going on, what programs are working, and what programs maybe we should drop. Sometimes that's a big part of administering a budget and a school is figuring out what not only should we add or direction should we go, but what are the things that are not working for us that we can eliminate.
And that's part of that overall financial picture you receive with a good budget.
Absolutely. And obviously, as I'm going through, I can track this month by month, given the spreadsheet. So it helps me there too.
So the next tab on this, our wonderful template budget spreadsheet, is your salaries. And so you can input as many teachers or even input their names for your school specific here, whether they're K through 8 or preschool or aides, any kind of tech support. We can put Will's salary in here. Anything like that, you can go ahead and put in what their annual salary is, what the payment is for health, Social Security taxes, pension, and you'll get a number for their total pay package, which then here at the bottom then fills out your total, what you're spending totally on salaries and teacher compensation, which is a really big part of your budget.
Largest part of your budget. I mean, if you were to look at your budget, personnel expense is always your largest portion of the budget. The marker on that, financial marker on that is typically, it's probably 85% of your overall expenses at a school. And if you start to go beyond 85%, that's should be red flags. And if you get it down to about 75%, that's a real sweet spot in terms of schools. Historically, Lutheran schools are 85% of our expenses are personnel. And that includes salaries, benefits.
All of the above.
We have a question from Julie Grant. Julie is asking if you have grant funds, would you put those in the soft money category? Is that correct?
Yes, I would put that in the soft money category because hard money you want to typically keep to your tuition because it's the one thing that you set and you know will be a constant income because your students have to pay tuition to come. Yeah. Grants can come and go from year to year.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it, is the what's constant. And tuition, you know.
Yep.
The others you can guess at a little bit. Yeah. So yeah, I would put that in there, and calculating it out, you know, it's going to spit the number out one way or another. But yes, definitely soft money.
And it's also good to denote where your grants are coming from and what they're hitting, because some grants you receive might be for specific purposes, whether it's athletics, books, equipment. Sometimes there's stipulations on those and they're restricted income. And so it's nice to keep them in a separate bucket from your tuition to know, hey, this is auxiliary income that's maybe for a specific purpose, and we might not have it every year.
Yeah, and you can think of, you know, some of you are in schools that are receiving vouchers. You might be in a school that has a scholarship granting organization that is providing dollars for you as well. We know what those numbers are. So again, that would be hard income, because that number is given to you. You know, it might be $62.50 per student. So you know exactly what it is.
And that's part of your tuition calculation to say, this is one of the sources of our income with our tuition.
Exactly.
So after this, and the colors are a little bit ugly on this salary school. So as always, feel free to make it your own if you download it.
Accounting doesn't know how to use fancy colors like school ministry.
We see red and black is what we see. So
hopefully more black than red.
Hopefully more black than red. And so this last tab is a useful facilities expense. And as we talked about in previous years, Dr. Freeman's a fan of calculating your expenses and facilities down to lighting the gym for a basketball game, correct?
Absolutely. We knew exactly how many lights we had and how much each light cost us to run.
Yeah. And so in this, it's a smaller portion than the other spreadsheets, but it's pretty simple. You put in your utilities number for the year. So far we spent $250 in utilities, and we've projected so far to have $300. So there at the bottom, you've got your total of what your year-to-date actual and projected is as you continue to fill out these numbers. And you can also compare it against your budgetary number over in this tab. And so it's a nice visual representation. As we've said from the beginning, financial reports are a snapshot or an image of your school or organization's health at any given time. And so the more simple that picture is, the easier it is to make decisions and just to see how you're doing overall.